I can actually offer several answers to that question. So the United States has a federal system of government, which means there's a national government, and then there are 50 states, and each state has its own state government. And there is a federal constitution, which is the supreme law of the land. It is the ultimate source of authority for the United States. But it's also the case that each state in the United States has its own state constitution, which governs within that state subject to the federal constitution. And so we have one overarching constitutional tradition in the United States, but we have 50 additional constitutions with their own traditions. So the federal constitution is very difficult to amend. It requires supermajorities of both houses of the federal legislature, and it then requires ratification by 3/4 of all the states. So 2/3 of both houses of Congress and then 3/4 of the states need to come together to amend the Constitution. It's a very demanding standard. There are 27 amendments to our Constitution. The Constitution has been in existence, it's been ratified for, what is it now, 220, oh God, don't make me do math, 226 years. Is it? Right, 36, I'm sorry. Doing math on TV is a very bad idea. So the number of occasions that has been amended is actually fewer in the sense that the first 10 amendments to the Constitution that the ambassador mentioned, the Bill of Rights, were all presented at the same time. And so there have really been basically 18 occasions that the Constitution has been amended in more than 200 years. Our state constitutions have a variety of traditions. There are some states where it's very easy to amend the Constitution. California, a state that many of you may be familiar with, has a constitution that is relatively easy to amend. An amendment to the Constitution can be put on a popular ballot with a certain number of signatures and requires basically a majority vote of the voting population. It's a much easier standard. And so the question of how difficult it should be to amend the Constitution is one that is subject to debate. The stability of the federal Constitution in the United States has, I think, been one of its strengths. But where you have a Constitution that's difficult to amend, part of what that means is that it requires a greater ability of courts that are interpreting the Constitution to be responsive to new claims, new questions, new situations. And constitutions are often written in relatively expansive or open-ended language with the anticipation that the principles in that constitution will be interpreted over time by legislatures, but also by courts, whose job it is to figure out how these principles should be understood in light of new problems, in light of new circumstances. And if you have a constitution which is very difficult to amend, it requires that kind of judicial responsiveness, I think, in order to give voice to those principles over the course of time.
Thank you. Now, today we talk about the amendment and the process and the rule of law and legitimacy of government and definitions of rights. So, after all, I personally feel that we are centering on the safety environment. We people want to have the safety environment at any cost of the rules or laws or approach or rights. So is there any final thoughts from our distinguished panels on it?
Okay, and now we talk a lot, and most people think that we playing to the government and the current government and the authority, but it's not like that. They have their own responsibility, and we have our own responsibility to be a better genuine democracy and peace. So we we feel like that we have a responsibility to our people to know about the civic education. Civic education is the very basic principle to know about what to do and what we should not do, because we, in our school curriculum, we don't have the kind of lessons in our school curriculum. So that's why, although we talk about the rule of law or other things that this is on the other side, from our civilian side, and ordinary civilians should know about what is right and what is wrong, what is their rights and responsibility. So far, the civil society are doing a lot for that issue, but compared with the whole population, it is not enough. We need more advocacy and education program to get a better peace and democracy.
Thank you, Kinley. This is ethical issues of the mutual respect. So can I have any more from?
Well, the safety environment is really, really important. I think, I do believe that rule of law is very important for the safety environment. Without rule of law and granting the fundamental rights, so there cannot be no peace, there cannot be peace, so there will be no peace and there will be no, the security if there is no rule of law.
And your professor?
I guess the last thing I'll say is this. The people in this room, many of the people whom I've had the privilege to meet with this week, who have impressed me so very much, you all are now engaged in a form of civic engagement, right? Around questions of governmental reform, around questions of constitutional reform. And what I would encourage you to recognize is that that kind of civic engagement doesn't end with the drafting of a new constitution or amendments to an existing constitution. It begins, right? The purpose of addressing constitutional questions is not to answer difficult questions that the people then no longer need to worry about. You figured out how to write the Constitution, it's done. The purpose of addressing constitutional questions is to create a society, to create governmental institutions where the people can engage, can conduct civic engagement as part of the regular experience of their lives in a shared society, right? Where your lives will be about determining what kinds of communities you want to live in and share, and having government be responsive to the types of communities that you want to have. And civic engagement of the kind that you're doing right now is not just about addressing constitutional questions. It is about becoming citizens in a full democracy.
And Your Excellency, for your final comment.
Well, I would just echo that. I would say the same. I think we heard before the cameras went on some presentations about conversations that you had today as you thought about what the rule of law meant to you, and discussing among yourselves what are the principles that you want to live under, what is important.